The funny thing about being the woman behind the curtain is that people start believing the curtain is all there ever was. They stare at the man in the spotlight until their eyes water, and they forget someone is back there, hands on ropes, timing the cues, watching the seams, making sure the whole glittering show doesn't collapse in front of an audience that paid to be impressed. I was that woman. For 25 years, I lived in the quiet hum of machinery, the whir of printers in the early morning, the crisp bite of paper edges under my fingertips, the smell of coffee gone cold because I kept forgetting to drink it, the private satisfaction of seeing chaos take shape into something stable, contracts signed, crews scheduled, permits filed, budgets held like a promise. My husband liked to talk about vision, big words, big gestures. He liked to say he built things. He did. In the same way a man swings a hammer once for the photograph and calls himself the carpenter. But I was the one who measured. I was the one who checked the load-bearing beams. I was the one who knew what happens when a foundation is poured wrong and everybody keeps smiling anyway. I'm in my 70s now. I've got a granddaughter who thinks my laugh comes from some secret place in my chest where I keep sunshine stored. I've got knees that complain about stairs. I've got hands that have learned the language of small pains. And I've got a memory that still keeps receipts, even when my heart wishes it didn't. That night hour so-called celebration, I remember the sound more than the sight. The clink of glasses, the roar of men congratulating men, the low, expensive music trying to soften the edges of everyone's ambition, the laughter that comes a fraction too late, the kind that means someone is watching to see what's funny before they decide to join in. Our home was full of people who wore money like perfume. The air was thick with it. I had chosen a plain dress, not because I didn't know how to sparkle, because I knew sparkling was a trick light plays to distract you from what's cracking underneath. I stood in my own kitchen, where I had planned the tile and argued over cabinet hinges and insisted the pantry be deep enough to hold a year's worth of storms. Watching servers move plates like choreography, watching my husband hold court like a king who'd forgotten how many hands lifted him onto the throne. And there she was, the new orbit, the bright young satellite everyone pretended not to notice even as their eyes kept drifting toward her like moths to a porch light. She wasn't wearing a ring, but she wore ownership. That's the best way I can describe it. It was in the way she stood too close, in the way she touched his sleeve like she was dusting something off that belonged to her, in the way she laughed, head tilted, mouth open, as if joy was her birthright and everyone else was lucky to witness it. I had watched the affair unfold, the way you watch mold creep across a wall quietly, steadily, while the person responsible insists it's nothing, it's just shadows, the lighting is bad, you're imagining things, the late meetings, the conferences that never produced a report, the new cologne he wore like armor, the way he started treating my questions like inconveniences instead of the careful checks that kept our life from sliding into debt and embarrassment. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I didn't perform a tragedy for the guests. I hosted. I smiled. I moved through my own house like a woman who knew where every switch was, because she'd wired the whole place with her own mind. Maybe that's what made him bold. My calm. Men like my husband mistake calm for surrender. They think a woman's silence means she's shrinking, when really she's measuring the room, counting exits, noticing what can be used as leverage. The party thinned out late, the last of the important people left in sleek cars, trailing smoke and compliments. The staff collected empty glasses. The music turned down until it sounded like a distant heartbeat. I walked out onto the terrace because I needed air that hadn't been passed, mouth to mouth all evening. That's where I found them, under the soft glow of the patio lights, framed by the city below like they were posing for a magazine spread. He had a drink in his hand. She had her hand on him. That's simple, territorial placement. Not a hug, not affection, a claim. I approached with the same steady pace I used when walking into a job site alert, unhurried, unafraid of dust. I said something neutral, something hostess-like, that the evening went well, that people seemed pleased, that the company looked strong. She turned and smiled at me like she was doing me a favor by acknowledging my presence. You know that smile, the one that says, I'm younger than you, and I'm going to make you feel it. My husband didn't look embarrassed. That's what hit first. Not pain, disbelief. A man who has a secret usually looks like he's carrying a jar of nitroglycerin careful, tight. He looked loose. He looked triumphant, like he'd finally told himself a story where he was the hero, and now he couldn't wait to recite it out loud. It's time we stop pretending, he said. I remember the way my stomach tightened, the way my body recognized danger before my brain formed words. Pretending. That meant he'd already rewritten history in his head. That meant my years had already been edited into something smaller, easier to discard. Pretending what? I asked, and my voice sounded normal. Which is still one of the strangest miracles of my life. He exhaled like he was about to deliver wisdom, like I should be grateful for his honesty. I should never have married you, he said. The sentence landed so quietly it could have been a leaf falling, but it hit me like a demolition ball. 20-5 years, a whole adult lifetime. My body had changed in that time. My hair had turned silver. My skin had learned the map of sorrow and laughter. I had carried him through failures no one remembers. I had stood beside him while he shook hands, while he accepted awards, while he played the part of the self-made man, and there he was, looking at me like I was a chair he'd grown tired of sitting in. You were useful, he added, as if that word could be an apology and a compliment at the same time. You kept things steady. You were the groundwork. But I want more. He turned toward her when he said it, like the more had a shape and a waist and a future that looked nothing like me. She's the top floor, he said. The view, the excitement, you're the base, solid, boring. Boring. Do you know what boring is? When you've spent your life being the adult in the room? When you've spent your life making sure the bills are paid and the employees get their checks and the taxes are filed on time? Boring is what people call responsibility when they want to feel justified chasing pleasure. I felt something split inside me. Not loudly, not like a scream, like ice cracking underfoot, and in that crack, something else rose quiet, clear, almost calm. Because he had said the word foundation as an insult. And anyone who has ever built anything real knows. Insult the foundation if you want, but you don't get to stand above it without consequence. He handed me papers the next day. He did it like a man tossing coins to someone on the street. A generous settlement, a city condo, a temporary allowance, a timeline for me to remove my things from his house, as if the walls didn't still echo with my decisions, my taste, my labor. He leaned on the doorway of my office, and smiled like he had already won. It'll be easier if you're reasonable, he said. Reasonable. That word. Men use it like a leash. I looked at the envelope and didn't touch it. I asked about the company. He laughed. A short, dismissive burst. That's my name, he said. My brand. You handled details. You're good at details. But you're not the face. You're not the reason people invest. He said it with such confidence. Such casual cruelty. Like truth was, whatever he said loudest. And I nodded. I let my face soften into something he could misread. Of course, I said quietly. I'll have my attorney review it. He left the room pleased with himself. I watched him go and felt no urge to chase. I had chased enough in my life: deadlines, payroll, permits. I wasn't going to chase a man who wanted to be a boy again. That night, while the house slept, I sat alone at my desk with a cup of tea and a lamp that made a small, honest circle of light. My hands didn't shake. My heart was bruised. Yes, but my mind was a machine I had built over decades. It did not stop functioning because someone broke my feelings. I opened the company systems the way I always had. He'd tried to lock me out, changed passwords, revoked access, the childish part of power. He forgot I had built the architecture, forgotten that in every security upgrade he'd approved with a board signature, I had installed redundancy. Not for betrayal back then. I still believed in him, but because good systems anticipate failure. A server goes down, a laptop gets stolen, a key employee quits. You prepare. And I had prepared. I slipped in through doors he didn't know existed, the digital equivalent of knowing where the spare key is buried. Because you were the one who buried it. What I found at first was almost laughable. Big, sloppy spending disguised as client development. Hotel suites, fine dining, jewelry stores, boutique receipts, weekend business retreats that coincided perfectly with her social media posts. The kind where she posed in sunlight with a glass in her hand, captioned with things like "blessed and hard work pays off." Hard work, yes. Mine did. I printed everything. Every receipt. Every transaction. Every memo. I made folders. I cross-referenced dates. I built a story the way I always had, brick by brick, number by number, proof by proof. The more I dug, the uglier it got. Shell accounts. Fake consulting fees. Company funds rerouted like quiet rivers into places only he could reach. Not just infidelity. Theft. Not just betrayal of me. Betrayal of the employees who trusted our company to be stable. Betrayal of the clients who signed contracts believing they were dealing with professionals. He had been siphoning the life out of what we built to buy himself a fantasy. And he called me boring. In those nights, I learned something about myself that I wish I had learned younger. Heartbreak is not always the end of a woman. Sometimes it is the moment she becomes dangerous in the best possible way, dangerous to anyone who mistook her loyalty for stupidity. I hired an attorney who didn't blink when I placed my binder on her desk. She was older than my husband, sharp-eyed.com. The kind of woman who doesn't waste words on sympathy. When strategy is needed, she flipped through my documentation, and I watched her face change from polite interest to something like admiration. "You did your homework," she said. "I built the house," I replied, and felt something in my chest steady. We filed quickly, quietly, like a trap being set. Divorce papers, motions for asset freezes, requests for forensic accounting. The legal system is slow, but when you bring it a clean map of wrongdoing, it can move like a blade. My husband reacted exactly as I predicted. He raged. He called me vindictive. He told people I was trying to destroy him because I couldn't accept the truth. The truth. As if truth had anything to do with his appetite. He hired expensive lawyers who spoke in polished phrases about reasonable settlements and shared contributions while trying to paint me as a glorified assistant who got emotional and confused about her place. But numbers don't care about charm. Ledgers don't blush. Receipts don't melt under a booming laugh. When he sat for deposition, he tried to perform. He talked about vision. He talked about leadership. He talked about how he carried the company. My attorney slid my documents across the table one by one, and I watched the performance crumble. A contract with my signature as primary negotiator. A bank record showing the down payment on our first equipment purchase came from my inheritance. Emails where clients asked for me by name because Michelle always makes it happen. Timesheets showing I was in the office at dawn while he was traveling with her. Then the expenses. The jewelers. The hotels. The client dinners where no client existed. Photos from her own phone posted publicly. Time-stamped like little confessions. Her smile bright and careless. Watching him realize he had been caught by his own arrogance was a quiet kind of justice. Not the dramatic kind you see in movies. No screaming. No thrown chairs. Just the slow draining of color from a man's face when he understands the ground under him is no longer solid. She was subpoenaed to the mistress. She came in wearing confidence like armor, until questions began slicing it open. What was her job description? What projects did she oversee? Why did her work travel coincide with luxury resorts? Why did she receive deposits from a vendor that didn't exist outside of paper? She cried. She tried to charm. She tried to claim she was misled. But I had learned, long ago, that youth is not innocence. It's just a shorter history. In the end, my husband sat across from me in a conference room and looked like a man who finally understood what it means to lose not just money, but narrative. His entire identity had been built on being the hero, the builder, the genius. Now the records told another story. And it wasn't flattering. The settlement wasn't a negotiation. It was a salvage operation for him. I took controlling interest in the company. I took reimbursement for what he wasted. I took my name back in the places he had tried to erase it. The house was sold. The marble, the chandeliers, the sprawling rooms where strangers once drank and praised him. I didn't keep it out of spite. I let it go because it had become a museum of my own endurance. And I wanted a home that didn't echo with the sound of my patience being mistaken for permission. He looked at me during that final meeting and whispered, "You're taking everything." And I surprised myself by feeling sadness instead of triumph. Not for him. For the years. For the woman I used to be loyal in a way that assumed it would be returned. "I'm not taking everything," I told him. "I'm taking back what you treated like it was yours by default." He didn't have a response that time. Men like him rarely do when the woman they dismissed refuses to stay small. Now I wake up in a quieter place. Smaller. Warmer. Mine. The morning light comes in gently. No longer filtered through anyone else's ego. I drink my coffee while it's still hot. I water my plants. I take calls from project managers who respect me because they've seen what stability looks like when it's real. Sometimes my granddaughter sits at my kitchen table with her homework spread out like a little empire of her own. And I watch her chew the end of her pencil, the way my husband used to, except she has none of his entitlement. Thank God. She has curiosity. She has grit. People ask me if I regret it. If I regret the marriage, the years, the building. I don't regret building. Building is what I do. It's what my hands and mind were made for. I regret misunderstanding what I was building on. Because love is supposed to be more than a transaction. Partnership is supposed to be more than a ladder someone climbs while stepping on your fingers. But I also know this. There is a peculiar grace in discovering your strength late. It feels like finding a key in an old coat pocket you stopped wearing years ago. It doesn't change the winters you already endured, but it changes how you walk into the next one. He called me the foundation like it was an insult. He forgot foundations don't beg for the penthouse. They don't compete with the skyline. They don't need applause. They simply decide, one day, whether they will keep holding the weight. And when they decide not to, when they finally choose themselves, the people above feel it first as a tremor. Then as a sudden, terrifying silence, the kind right before everything collapses. Sometimes at night, when the world is still, I think of the woman I was at 48, quiet, efficient, sure that devotion would be rewarded. I want to reach back through time and touch her shoulder. I want to tell her, she wasn't foolish for loving. She was only wrong about one man's capacity to deserve it. And that's a hard lesson, but it's also a clean one. Because now, when I look at my life, I don't see what he took. I see what I saved. I see what I rebuilt. I see the way I didn't let bitterness turn my heart to rubble. I let it become rebar stronger, hidden, holding me steady. The city outside my window is still full of towers and men who think they're the reason the skyline exists. Let them believe it. Let them toast themselves at expensive parties. Let them call women boring when women are the ones keeping the lights on. I've learned to be grateful for quiet mornings and honest work. I've learned that dignity is not something a husband grants you like a gift. It is something you keep in your own hands, even when they're tired. And when my granddaughter hugs me, when her small arms wrap around my waist like I'm the safest place on earth, I understand something that makes the whole story settle into a softer shape. The foundation wasn't just the company, it was me. It always was. And I will never again hand someone the privilege of standing on me while they try to pretend they built the world alone.